Jon Sopel's here, co-host of Global's podcast, The Newsagents, and I know that this is a topic that you're going to be discussing or have already been discussing on the podcast.
Yeah, and it's a great question. Look, the fact that the Prince of Wales, Prince William, is talking about mental health is fantastic, and it's a serious subject, and it is right that people are addressing issues around therapy and being able to externalise stuff that, when I was a kid you just didn't talk about at all, and particularly for young men, and avoiding suicide, and all those things are absolutely critical. But we are in a situation where there is another national conversation that is taking place about Jeffrey Epstein and about the questions that need to be answered by Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. And although he's denied any wrongdoing, we know that there have been lies told in the interview that he did with my colleague Emily Maitlis. Mm-hmm. We know that there are fresh allegations. We've seen photographs. It seems inconceivable to me that you would have the heir to the throne in a studio and not put at least one question. Because in fairness to the Prince, he put out a statement about the victims. There's been plenty of stuff off the record briefing of friends close to the Prince saying, we've never been close to Andrew, never had a close relationship. Well, then it's time, surely, that you would say, I know we're here to talk about mental health, but can we just talk about, for one moment, and it seems to me very surprising.
An opportunity missed, in a way.
Well, very surprising. And we had yesterday, we talked to Annie Hughes about the kind of the issue of whether the Metropolitan Police Royal Protection Officers are too close to the royal family and just do their bidding and kind of don't call out wrongdoing when they see it. And I just wonder whether the same question applies to the broadcasters and the national broadcaster, of whether they too are too close. And, does there come a point where look, we don't know. We're waiting to hear from the BBC about whether they sought permission and were told you can't ask about it, or whether it never arose. We don't know what the ground rules were for the interview. But there comes a point where surely things have changed, and that the old way of doing things, of deference and all the rest of it, and being overly respectful, have gone. And you need to ask that question now, because I'm a royalist. I support the royal family. But there are questions now about accountability, about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, that you just need to address.
They're deeply serious questions, aren't they? They're not your normal fodder. This is serious stuff.
Yeah, it really is. And the explanations that have been given so far, and we report, breaking news, another police force is opening an investigation into whether young girls were trafficked into this country on private jets belonging to Jeffrey Epstein.
And in the most recent dump of files, a new a woman we hadn't heard of before alleged that she was trafficked into this country.
So these are really, really serious questions. And it just seems to me that when, there are questions facing Peter Mandelson, and there are many more questions facing Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, it's just very odd that you don't ask that question. And so what we've done on the Newsagents is try to unpick what this relationship is between the monarchy and the broadcasters, and whether you think if we upset the palace, do we then get blackballed and we won't get access to this or that or other?
Well, Harry said so, didn't he?
And I think that those are the sort of things where, we're still going to respect our royal family. They're not going to be treated like politicians. But, you listen to Nick Ferrari any morning and the government minister is on, and the minister is on to talk about, I don't know, the state of the economy or the health service. And Nick's going to say, before we come to that, I've got to ask you about this latest thing. And yet a programme has taken place today in which Prince William has participated about mental health. And at no point do they say, I need to ask you about this.
I suspect, because we know the business and then we know that organisation as well, I suspect they would say it's not a news programme.
Yeah.
It's a programme, it's called Life Hacks. It's about, how do you get through life?
Yeah.
What's your life hack? It might be swimming, it might be what the Prince himself described, it might be horse riding, whatever it is. But even then, I think, I was saying earlier that which press team at this moment says, that's a good idea, do that?
Well, it's interesting on both sides, actually, about, does the BBC kind of not dig in and say, No, that
Not
honestly,
for now.
not
Yeah.
for now. I mean, we really would love to get the Prince on talking about mental health, but we've got to address this question. So if he doesn't want to do it, maybe we'll pass on this occasion. And surely the palace recognises that this needs to be addressed. I know there's been a statement, but why are you giving off-the-record briefings on a regular basis about, there was something in the Telegraph yesterday, there was something in Hello magazine a couple of days ago, where sources close to are saying, well, we've never had a close relationship with Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. If you're doing that, then actually I think it's time that you kind of front up a bit, and it will be done very respectfully. But I think that, there's something has changed, and there does need to be a bit of transparency and a bit of accountability about that.
And I think we're feeling in a very jarring way, or witnessing in a very jarring way, that, I'll misquote it, but that old idea that you let the light in on the royals and the magic flows out.
Yeah, it's the old Badgett line, isn't it? From the 19th century. Yeah. Look, they're not going to be just another ordinary family. But I think that the contract, and they don't face re-election. They're not Keir Starmer or Kemi Badenoch or Nigel Farage. They are there. But there is a contract with the British people that they need to have the consent of the British people and the support of the British people.
And typically they do in very large numbers.
And if you look at the history over the last 100 or so years, there was the abdication crisis where public opinion mattered. There was, the death of Prince William's mother, Diana, and the feeling that the royal family were misreading the mood of the nation and needed to kind of respond to that. So there are the royal family's great success story, and the reason that it continues is that it has adapted to change.
And it sniffs the wind.
And it sniffs
just in
the
time.
wind. Just in time. And I think this is such a moment because the seriousness of the allegations and the inadequacy of the response from Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor are such that I think there is an impatience over this.
And I said at the very beginning of this hour that I don't want it to be an attack on the Prince of Wales talking about mental health, the work that he has done on mental health, because as you said, it is incredibly important, and it has been a generational sea change how we talk about mental health, and all to the good, and still work to be done on that. But let's not forget whose mental health is in tatters at the moment, and the answer is the victims of Jeffrey Epstein and others. And one of those others may well be Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. Virginia Giuffre certainly said it was. And that, for me, that's why it's so jarring. If he is talking about someone's well-being, I want it to be the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, not himself.
And I think that is something that has been missed. I mean, if you think of, when Mandelson gave that interview and, will you apologise to the victims? And initially said no. And then kind of 24 hours later, yes, I do. Yes, I apologise to the victims. And there just hasn't been enough about the victims of Jeffrey Epstein over all of this. And I think this is a critical moment because, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor is right at the centre of a lot of these allegations and a lot of the concern over the young women whose lives have been upended by what happened to them when they were at a very early age. And I think that there does need to be a response. And so I think, things have changed a bit.
And the reality is of their job, the royals' job, is that they do go to lots of different places and meet lots of different people and give lots of different statements and speeches about lots of different issues. They do, that's part of their job. My worry, if I were their press person, would be nobody's going to be listening to you on this, or this until you address this elephant in the room.
Yeah, and I think that they're very sophisticated and clever people who run royal press, but they're used to doing things in a certain way, and they've probably thought, this is clever. It's not a news program, so and it's a panel discussion, so we'll be able to stick to the subject that we want. Look, Prince William took part in a really interesting interview with the Canadian actor Eugene Levy from Schitt's Creek.
Really enjoyable programme.
Really enjoyable programme where he sits over a pint of beer and says, the royal family's got to change. I'm going to change it when I am king. Well, yeah, okay, you want to change it? You could change something now by addressing this vitally important issue. You campaign on all your other issues as well. It's not either or. It's not either I talk about mental health or I talk about these things.
No.
You can do both.
And you'll probably only get a hearing on one if you talk about the other. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
And if his hands are tied and he's been told do not address it other than in a nice, neat little statement before you go to Saudi Arabia, then that's something I want to know about too. I want to know why.
Well, there was a reporter shouted a question, and it was initially reported that Prince William was heckled. Well, no, he wasn't heckled. He was asked a question, and there is a time
which again in the olden days would never have happened, would it? Typically,
of course, and I'm not suggesting that whenever the king leaves Buckingham Palace or Clarence House or wherever it is, that he has to do a doorstep interview with 15 reporters. Are you going to resign, Mr. King? Well, of course we're not going to do that.
Do you support reform? Reinstating the 2-child benefit cap, Prince William?
Exactly. No, that's not what's going to happen. No. But there is every now and then there will be an issue
moment
that needs to be addressed, and I think this is such a moment.